All right, in this explainer, we're going to break down the entire global economy. I'm talking about how money actually works, how prices get decided, and how this invisible system of power quietly shapes pretty much everything you do.
Think about it. You work 40 hours a week, you pay your taxes, you buy the things you need, and you really try to save a little something. And yet somehow, you still feel broke. Your parents? They probably earned less than you, but they built a life you can barely even dream of today. So what on earth changed? Well, it wasn't you, it was the game itself.
If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but you're still falling behind, there's a really simple reason for it. You were never taught the real rules. The rules of money, of prices, of power. So we're going to uncover them right now so you can stop getting crushed by a system that's basically designed to be confusing.
Okay, let's just start with the biggest misconception of all. Economics, it isn't really about money. No, at its absolute core, it's about one thing: scarcity. There just isn't enough stuff, time, resources, you name it, to go around for everyone. And that simple fact forces all of us to make choices.
And here's the brutal truth about those choices. They are not free. Every single choice you make, big or small, has a hidden cost. Economists call this opportunity cost. And it's not just about the money you paid, it's the value of the next best thing you could have done with that same resource, whether we're talking about your time or your cash.
Let me make this real for you. Let's say you buy a $50,000 car to, look successful. You aren't just spending 50 grand. You're also giving up the $174,000 that money could have become if you had just invested it for 30 years. You see? You didn't just buy a car. You literally traded a piece of your financial future for heated seats.
This brings us to one of the most powerful concepts in the entire world. Prices are messages. There's this famous story where the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev asked Margaret Thatcher how the British government made sure everyone got fed. And she gave this incredible reply. No central planner, no genius in an office could possibly calculate how many tomatoes need to be grown to feed a city like London. But prices? They do it automatically. A high price yells, "We need more," and tells suppliers to get to work. A low price whispers, "We've got plenty." The price isn't the enemy. It's the only truly honest signal we have in the whole economy.
Okay, so we use money to make all this trade stuff easier. But where does it actually come from? Most people think governments just, print it. But the reality is so much more complex and, honestly, a lot weirder than that.
So here's how it really works. You deposit $1,000 in the bank. The bank doesn't just stick it in a vault. Nope. Under a system called fractional reserve banking, it keeps a tiny piece of it, let's say $100, and then it lends out the other $900. Now that $900 gets deposited in another bank, which keeps $90 and lends out $810, and on it goes. Through this cycle, your original $1,000 deposit has magically created thousands of new dollars in the economy. Just think about that. Banks don't just store money, they literally create it out of thin air.
But here's the catch. This whole system of creating money from debt, well, it also creates massive, massive risk. And we all saw the devastating consequences back in 2008. It all started when banks started handing out home loans to people who, frankly, couldn't afford them. Then they bundled up all these risky loans and sold them to investors, telling them they were safe assets. But when people inevitably started defaulting and housing prices fell, the entire global financial system, which was built on this teetering mountain of debt, came crashing down. Now, after that crisis, governments borrowed trillions to bail out the very same banks that caused the problem. But that debt, it didn't just vanish. And that brings us to the invisible taxes, the sneaky ways the system erodes your wealth, often without you even noticing it's happening.
Just take a look at the current U.S. national debt. It's a number so huge it's almost meaningless to us. But let me try to put it in perspective for you. If you stacked this many $100 bills on top of each other, the pile would reach the moon and back twice. It's just insane.
And here's the thing you got to remember. Every single dollar of that debt eventually has to be repaid, with interest, by taxpayers. That means you and your kids. It's like a bill that's been run up on your credit card, and one of these days, that bill is going to come due.
The other hidden tax? It's inflation. Imagine you live in a tiny village. Overnight, the mayor secretly prints a ton of cash and gives it to all his friends. They wake up and rush out, buying up everything at the normal prices. Well, by the afternoon, the sellers realize there's a lot more money floating around, so they jack up their prices. Then you get off work, none of that new money ever made it to you, but now you're stuck paying these new, higher prices for everything. That's inflation. It's a massive pay cut delivered silently right into your pocket.
This might be the most important lesson in all of economics. Okay, so a kid breaks a baker's window, and people gather around and say, oh, look, this is actually good for the economy. The baker has to pay a glazier to fix it, and now the glazier has money to spend. But what you don't see is that the baker was going to use that exact same money to buy a new suit from the tailor. So the glazier's gain is the tailor's loss. Destruction doesn't create new wealth, it just moves it around. And politicians use this fallacy every single day to justify wasteful spending by pointing to the visible benefits while making sure you never see the invisible costs.
All right, now let's zoom out. We've talked about the individual level, but let's look at the global game board, where these same rules play out on a massive scale, driven by things like trade, technology, and, most importantly, productivity.
Have you ever wondered why some countries are rich and others are poor? Well, the answer is way simpler than you might think. It is not about working harder, it's about productivity. An American worker produces more economic value in a year because they have better tools, better technology, better infrastructure, better systems. It's that simple. Wealth always follows productivity.
So for decades, we built these hyper-efficient global supply chains. The phone in your pocket has parts from over 40 different countries, and this made everything incredibly cheap. But then, COVID hit. One factory in China shut down, and suddenly the entire world ran out of computer chips. We optimized so hard for efficiency that we left ourselves with zero backup, zero resilience. The system had no spare tire.
And the next big shock to the system? It's not coming. It's already here. Artificial intelligence and automation are doing to white-collar jobs right now what machines did to factory workers 100 years ago. And listen, this is not some future prediction. Companies are laying off highly skilled workers as we speak because software can do the job cheaper, faster, and 24/7. The question isn't if your job will be affected, it's just when.
So after all that doom and gloom, what are you supposed to do? Look, you can't change the whole system, but you can learn how to play the game so you don't get steamrolled by it. It's time to stop playing blind. Let's walk through your new playbook.
Rule number 1. Your salary is just a price, and it's paid for the value you create. To protect that value, you must develop skills that are hard to automate or outsource. We're talking about critical thinking, real leadership, genuine creativity, complex human connection. These are the skills that no algorithm can fully replicate, at least not yet.
Rule number 2. This is how you protect yourself from that invisible tax of inflation. You have to buy assets, not liabilities. So what's the difference? Assets are things that grow in value or put money in your pocket, like stocks, real estate, or a business. Liabilities are things that drain money from your pocket, like fancy cars, the latest gadgets, endless subscriptions. It's simple. Broke people buy liabilities to look rich. The wealthy buy assets to actually get rich.
Rule number 3. Not all debt is evil. Good debt is money you borrow to buy an asset that's going to generate income, like a mortgage on a rental property. Bad debt is what you use to buy comfort and things that lose value, like that 25% interest credit card balance you ran up on vacation. One builds wealth, the other absolutely suffocates it.
And finally, rule number 4. The biggest financial mistakes people make are almost always emotional. People panic and sell everything when the market crashes, which, by the way, is exactly when the wealthy are buying. They chase hot trends way too late. This economic game is a long one. It rewards a calm, rational, long-term perspective, and it brutally punishes fear and greed.
Look, the system isn't going to change for you, but once you understand how it actually works, you can stop playing blind. You can start making better decisions, protecting your money, and thinking completely differently about your time, your work, and your value. The game is the same, but now you know the rules. So the only question left is, how are you going to play?